Thank you, Mayor Turner. You can have a seat. I know Scott's going to be joining you. It's now my pleasure to introduce Scott McClelland, maybe second only to the mayor as the person who needs no introduction in this city. Scott is the vice chair of the Greater Houston Partnership this year, which means he'll be the chair next year. Of course, he's president of HEB Food and Drug, and you all know Scott as the face of the HEB commercials. But you may not know how much of a champion for education Scott is. He's the chair of Greater Good
Reason.
Good Reason. Boy,
Thank
I
you.
can't believe that. I'm on that board. Good Reason Houston, which is our broad cradle-to-career education effort in Houston. So with that, let me turn the floor over to Scott. Now, Scott, we don't have time for the easy questions, so just put the first 2 pages away and go right to the tough questions. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor, you have got a lot going on. I mean, shoot, the pressing question I had was, what's your favorite HEB commercial?
Oh, Scott, you may not like my answer. It's that last one, and you're not in it.
Oh, man.
Just kidding. Oh. Scott, I like every one of those commercials that you are in. Each one is my favorite.
Where is your next fundraiser? I'm there.
About a month from now.
Well, I'll say this. Is one thing about our mayor, he is always on the move. As an example, last Friday night, the mayor flew in from Washington, D.C., where he had represented the city, got in a car, went directly to Discovery Green, gave a speech there, came over to Herman Park. I was at an event there. He was on, just like he was at this speech here. And I think 2 words you used to describe our mayor is capacity and energy. And every time I pull up my Twitter feed, there's a picture of you representing our city somewhere or making a good decision about something that we're doing. And one of the things that you said on Friday night that really stuck with me was you said that you're committed to living a life of no regrets during the time that you're mayor of Houston. And I think what a beautiful way in which to put it. But now you've been in office for 2.5 years. You've seen a lot. You've done a lot. But if you had to point to one thing that you're most proud of, what would that be?
Scott, I don't know if it's one thing. I will tell you that the number one priority that I was facing when I came in was the pension system. $8.2 billion unfunded liability was growing by $1 million a day. It was crowding out everything else, and it had been unresolved for 17 years. The very fact that we came together collectively and got that squared away, the employee groups, I want to give a lot of credit for all of them, police, municipal workers. Even though we didn't keep fire all the way to the end, they were at the table for those 8 or 9 months. So I want to acknowledge them as well. City Council voted initially 16-1 in favor of it. Great Houston Partnership, Mark, thank you very much. Anthony, Chase, and others came in and helped out quite a bit. And the legislature voted in the Senate and the House, 2/3 margin. The governor signed it. And then in November of last year, even after the hurricane, 3/4 of Houstonians said yes. So I want to thank everybody. And now with the National League of Cities, they have us on the cover as Houston leading the way on pension reform.
Yeah, good for you. Well done. Well, we like to brag about Houston that we do things in a big way. And last year we did a storm in a big way. And the press coverage that we got really was the way in which the recovery occurred. We saw our weather at its worst. I think we saw our people at its best. And you acknowledged that in your comments, and really the leadership that you provided, and Judge Emmett, we owe so much of a debt of gratitude to you. But I think we'd all acknowledge that there's still a lot to do. And you can really break it into 2 different phases. First would be the repair and the recovery, getting people who have homes and businesses either back into them or get them relocated. And then the second piece would be resiliency, the efforts needed around protecting our homes and our businesses and infrastructure from future disasters. So what do you see as being the biggest needs now for the city of Houston in terms of both repair and resiliency, and how are you looking out to address those needs?
Well, and again, I want to give a great deal of credit to Marvin and to his team, Neil, and all of the department heads who have been working on it. I mean, we have to build stronger, and it has to be much more resilient, and it has to be transformational. and it's going to have to be a little disruptive. I mean, the reality is when you face 3 500-year storms in 3 consecutive years, the odds are you're going to be hit with another. And so normally the mitigation should come before the disaster. We are built on the Bayou City. We need to expand the channels. That's clear. We need more detention, regional detention, as well as on-site detention. That's important. For people in West Houston area, another reservoir. For people in the Kingwood area, on that side of town, dredging, bigger gates, for example, on that side. They've got some sand mining that takes place, and that silt comes into the San Jacinto Lake Livingston area. I mean, the San Jacinto and Lake Houston, so we need to address that. We need to be mindful, had that storm hit the Galveston Bay, it would have been even more horrific. So the coastal spine is a major project. It's a large one, $12 billion, but it's mitigation before the disaster. So mitigation is critically important. We made changes on Chapter 19. I know that there were some concerns. It wasn't a unanimous vote of City Council. When you're asking people to build higher in the city of Houston, and you're no longer saying we're going to be guided by the 100-year floodplain, but by the 500-year floodplain. But the reality, if we don't do all of these things in combination, we're not going to be as prepared. And lastly, what I would say, I want businesses to be in the area. I want them to expand. I want other businesses to come. But I think people will be reticent to come if they don't see us addressing the issue in a real way. And that's important. Now they see we are doing some things. We will now move to Chapter 9 and Chapter 13. Again, it will be a little disruptive. I understand that. But when I became mayor, I said it was not my desire to be an incrementalist, to do a little bit here and a little bit there, and at the end, you can't see the little bit that I've done. While I am mayor, let's be transformational. Let's build a city that's stronger, that's more resilient. Let's push out of our comfort zone. We can still develop. I want development. We can still build. I want that. But let's do it in a very responsible fashion so that we are not constantly going to the federal government asking them to write a check. And one thing that's been demonstrated by Hurricane Harvey, the federal government is not going to continue to write the checks like they've done in the past. They're not treating us like Louisiana, like New York. So this is a can-do spirit, and in the end, we're going to have to stand up and, in large part, take care of ourselves.
Yes, understand. Absolutely. And you did talk about some of the things about preventing future flooding, looking at the channels, et cetera. What are your thoughts about a third reservoir?
Well, I think we need to have that, either a third reservoir. The question is where exactly you're going to place it, or you have to build capacity. Okay, you got to do one or the other or both. So there's no question we need that. But that's on one side. On the other end, the dredging is important, okay, and building more gates. So there are multiple things. And again, it's not one thing. It's a series of things that need to be done in combination. The question is where the funding will come from. These things need to take place. Yeah. The mitigation dollars, we're expecting about $1.2 billion in this first round. Most of that will be spent on housing and on infrastructure related to housing. In that second round, at $5 billion, we can look at mitigation dollars for like the third reservoir and some other things. Or I would tell you, this is just me. If I were the state, what I would do is that I would go ahead and advance that $500 million to build that reservoir. And then when the city and the county get their money, we could give it back to the state, but the things would start rolling right now. So that's what I would do.
Well, that sounds like it could be the ounce of prevention,
right? So
that you don't have to come back and repair later on.
Well, we cannot wait. We can ask Mother Nature to wait, but Mother Nature may not pay any attention to us. So I think we have to engage in those mitigation strategies. And I don't forget housing, because we still have 2,000 people in the hotels, and we have thousands of people living in homes that need to be repaired and remediated.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about HISD. You and I have talked about it on numerous occasions, and you touched on it in your comments. But what role do you see the city of Houston having in helping to educate really our diverse population to meet the needs of the workforce that we have in Houston going forward?
Well, City of Houston is, we're not the superintendent, and no one is attempting to be a superintendent. That's, our plate is quite full, but the realities is that you can't have a dynamic city if your educational institutions are not also dynamic and moving in the same direction. We are inextricably connected, and I can't ignore those realities. There are 17 school districts that traverse the city of Houston, but Houston Independent School District bears our name. And for cities outside of Texas, New York's school systems controlled by the city, so to speak, Chicago, Philadelphia, and all of those, Boston, not interested in doing that. But we do have, because of the bill that was passed in 2015, 1842, if you have schools that's been low performing for 5 consecutive years, the state can step in, either close those schools or take over the management of your entire school district. I don't think that's the right model. But we do have to address those schools that remain in low-performing status for that period of time. I am now committing myself, because too much confusion doesn't do anybody good. Doesn't help HISD, doesn't help the city of Houston. I am committing myself to join with others, business community and others, to see about coming up with a viable model, and I'm talking about like a nonprofit, that can address those schools that are in low-performing status, similar to what Mayor Villaraigosa did in Los Angeles 10 years ago. It was a nonprofit that stepped in. They had a philanthropist who committed $50 million over a 10-year period. They brought in all the necessary resources. It was an intensive support to those low-performing schools, and they were at the bottom. They started turning around those schools. Dropout rate decreased. More kids were going to college, and it worked. If LA was able to do that, and apparently would do it with some success, then Houston needs to look at a similar model. What I do know is that, and I'm not asking anything with city dollars. I got my city council members, so let me be very loud and clear. Not trying to pull any dollars from the city of Houston, but I think we can create a nonprofit where I'm giving supervision leadership to it, and because the reality is, as go education in our city, so will go our city itself. And companies are not going to move into our city if they do not see us providing a quality education. We can't ignore it any longer. We have to address it, and we have to address it head on. And so let's see what we can develop.
All right. Truer words have never been spoken about that than that. I think one of the things that you and I have talked about frequently is in the conversations currently about education is you hear a lot about control and power. And you and I have talked about the real need to focus on kids. And you talked about it, look, not getting the right amount of funding from the state. We've got underperforming schools, the list goes on. And so how do we keep this focus on kids and less about who's leading?
Well, I think you have to stay focused. Who's the consumer?
Yeah.
Who's the ultimate end user? These are our kids. And it's our responsibility to be good stewards, okay? What I will say to people in this room and those who are not in this room, you cannot create enough charters to take care of every kid in your public school system. There are 215,000 kids in HISD alone, okay? There is value in public education. We can't give up on public education. I'm a product of the public education system. I'm a product. But it's all of our responsibility, okay? My mom worked as a maid, but it was my neighbor also that was making sure that we were staying on course. And my mom used to always say, look, I'm sending you to school. If the teacher calls and you're acting up and I can't get there, I've given Miss Nims, the next door neighbor, permission to go to you and handle you until I get there. And then you're going to really have a problem, But the point is, it's a holistic deal. I will say, our schools didn't just start failing yesterday. It didn't just start yesterday. We've had schools even in HISD that have been failing for years. That's why I talk about complete communities. Complete communities just didn't come up overnight. I still live in a neighborhood that's underserved and under-resourced. 2 of the schools that's on that list, those 10 schools, come out of Acres Home. Highland Heights, my daughter went to Wesley. When those 2 schools were exemplary schools, when they pulled those principals and they went other places, the good teachers went with those principals. And those schools came from being exemplary. Now they are on the list that's poised to be closed, okay? So the schools just didn't start failing. They have been failing. What I am saying to people in this room tonight is that we now collectively have a commitment to step in, to provide support, and to let these children know that they are valuable, that we are going to be supportive of them, we're going to surround them with what they need, and it's not just building good quality schools, it's building good quality neighborhoods from which these kids come. And we all have a responsibility to make that happen.
I'll give you a strong amen to that. And thank you, Mayor. And I think for everybody here today, one of the things the Mayor just said is good quality education of our kids starts not just with the Mayor, but with each and every one of us, because the conversation is not about your kids, it's about all of our kids.
These are our children. I don't care who they look like, I don't care where they come from. These are our children. And when you look in the faces of these kids, they are your future city council members. They're your future mayors. They're your future CEOs. They all have potential. And so we have to invest in them, but we cannot find acceptable failing schools. Failing 1 year is failing too many years. And so we will have to change the paradigm. We will have to make some tough decisions because failing schools is not acceptable in the city of Houston. And we should not tolerate it, even whether we have kids in the school systems or not, it should not be tolerated. And we are smart enough to improve the quality of education of every school within our city limits, and we ought to do just that.
Good. Look, I'd like to sit here and talk all afternoon about education, and next to groceries, it's my second favorite topic. But let me switch gears again. Last week, we were at the Kinder Institute luncheon where Steve Kleinberg shared the results of his annual survey, something we all look forward to. And I always look to see, hey, what is on Houstonians' mind? And the number one thing right now, traffic.
Traffic.
And so if you look at mobility, and our population is going to continue to grow, and as that happens, more cars on the road. So what are your thoughts on how we improve traffic congestion within the city and across the region? And what role do you see public transportation playing to include that of Metro?
And I know Karen Patman is here and Tom Lambert with Metro and a number of others that are here. It is the number one concern that people have, getting from point A to point B. More people are coming into our region, so that's important. It has to be multimodal. In the 90s, we made a decision we were going to build roadway capacity, and that was our focus. But now we have to provide people with multiple options. Whether it's light rail, whether it's, what do you call it, BBB, bus rapid transit, whether it's that, whether it's providing additional bike lanes, where we're looking at high comfort lanes because safety is critically important, whether it's some form of commuter rail. There are a lot of things that we're looking at. Even now when you're dealing with Uber and Lyft and all of these others that are in our area, you got taxis that are in our area, there are a lot of things that are taking place. What can take you to the last mile of the way? So we have to be very dynamic. I know Metro, and I've talked to Karen at length. We're looking at coming up with a plan that will meet our needs. What I've said to Karen is that we cannot put forth a Metro plan that doesn't move the needle, that doesn't take the ball further down the road. But we have to be smart at it, because now you have autonomous vehicles and a lot of other things that are on our roads that in some cases, in some cities, eating into public transportation, because people are able to get in a vehicle where they let somebody else doing the driving, and you end up having more vehicles on our street and fewer people taking public transportation. let me encourage people to take public transportation. That's critically important. But we have to offer multimodal forms of transportation. There's some other things that I'm going to talk about when I speak before the TAG luncheon at the State of Transportation coming up soon. And so they told me not to steal the thunder and for me not to speak too long on this topic. So you're going to have to buy a ticket, Scott, to get the rest of the story.
I shall. All right. Final question. I have a bunch more I want to ask, but my final question, so room's filled with folks from the business community. What would you ask of us? What's the one thing as business leaders that you would like us to do to help the city of Houston not just be a great city, but be a great global city? What's your request of us?
Thank you, and I appreciate the question. Be bold, be visionary. The port didn't just happen on its own. There were people who were bold. The Texas Medical Center didn't just happen on its own. People were bold. Houston has a lot that we can appreciate, but those achievements were made by yesterday's leaders in large part. Now, you know, as we would say at my church, we are the Nehemiahs on the wall. So we have to continue to build on the city. And we have to be bold. We have to be visionary. And let me tell you, and it also means that it doesn't come cheap. The city is here to be a partner, okay? Where we need to get out of the way, we'll get out of the way. But where we need to be able to have the infrastructure to support your business and your businesses, then we need to have that infrastructure to be supportive. We can't make brick without straw, okay? We can't do it. But we need to be bold. We need to be visionary. We need to be highly competitive. And we need to work even better together. And we cannot, and let me indict me, I'm talking to me, not to other political leaders in this room, okay? We cannot even allow political personalities to stop that growth and development or to take on initiatives that will cause other businesses and others to go someplace else. We can't run away from diversity. This is who we are. Stephen Kleinberg points out, it's the greatness of the diversity is the greatness of our city. What I would ask for the business community, you don't have to be political leaders, but you also need to lead. And you have to be careful where you put your dollars. If you're investing your dollars in personalities that's not advancing the city, then what are you investing in? Why work against your own self-interest? Okay? And so sometimes in the political discourse, you need that outside player to provide guidance even to the political system to say, check yourself, because what you are doing is not in our best interest. This is the time when the business community must speak loudly and clearly and give guidance. Oftentimes in a political environment where it is too divisive, you all must say time out, and that is not who we are, and it's not in our best interest. And so for the city of Houston, this is a great city. There is no other city on the face of the earth that has everything that we have in the city of Houston. The energy capital of the world, the largest medical center in the world, all of our colleges and institutions, the Johnson Space Center, the Port of Houston, #1 in foreign tonnage, the most diverse city in the country. But yet others are coming to us trying to get what we have and take it back with them. So as much as I'm disappointed with having lost Amazon, and I am, well, to me, this is our time to get ourselves ready for the next opportunity to come along. And if we all work together, there is no other city that can compete with this city when we all work together. We've seen that with the Astros, and they kick tail. When the Rockets play together, they prevail. When the Texans come along, they'll win too. The Dynamos, made it to the playoffs. This is our moment. This is our time. If any other city gets ahead of the city of Houston, it's not because they were better. It's just because we didn't play smart. And the business community is right there at the table.
Good. Let's hear it for our mayor.